Hey there, in this video I'm going to show you kind of a bare bones way you can use Python to automate backups for a hosted feature layer in ArcGIS Online. So as of recording this, ArcGIS Online doesn't have any sort of built-in way to handle backups of your data. So if you are working on something like you have a Survey 123 or a collector project, or you have a hosted feature layer that's in a web map, and either you're editing it or you've got coworkers or the public, editing or adding new submissions to it. You might run into a scenario where someone deletes something they shouldn't have, or data gets corrupted, etc., and you want to restore from a backup. Currently, the only way to do that is to come into ArcGIS Online and manually create a backup using the export data function. So this is my hosted feature layer. My example here, and again, this could be for a Survey 123. It could be for field maps or collector or any project you're working on, so long as it's a hosted feature layer. And you'd come into the item detail page here, click export data, and you have all these different options for the different file format you want. So let's say I click to export to FGDB, which is File Geodatabase. And what that does is it would create another item within my content that is a file geodatabase item. From there, you can either download or you can republish or update it, either overwrite or append the data in there, etc. And that's great if your data doesn't change very often. You just want to make kind of periodic manual backups. But say you have something that's changing a ton. Maybe you have a Survey 123 and there's new stuff coming in every day. It can be beneficial to kind of automate that process, have it maybe back up once a night on its own, once a week, etc. And so we can do that with Python in a pretty simple script. So like my last video, a couple quick disclaimers. I'm not a Python guru or anything, so if I do something that isn't best practice or it is frowned upon by the greater Python community, apologies in advance. The purpose of this is to kind of just create something as bare bones as possible, so we're not going to do any like error handling or anything like that. And second, I'm not gonna explain all the basics of Python in this. I'm not gonna, like what is a string and what is a list and how do those work together and that kind of thing. But if you don't know anything about Python at all, I think you'll be able to just follow along with this and what I'm writing, and I think you'll be able to get it to work. So what you're going to need for this, you're going to need something to write your Python script in. I like to use PyCharm, but there's a whole bunch out there, kind of free or open source ones. You can even just use like Notepad or any text editor if you want and just save it as a .py file. But for this video, I'm actually going to be using idle, which is a really bare bones Python IDE that comes packaged with ArcGIS Pro. So if you have ArcGIS Pro installed on your computer, you already have idle. And I'll put a link in the description of this video kind of showing you the general location of where that's going to be installed on your computer. And the other thing we're going to need the ArcGIS API for Python. As far as I'm aware, that is a free download. You can find it over on the ESRI website. However, again, if you have ArcGIS Pro installed on your computer, that comes with the ArcGIS API for Python already, so you don't have to do any sort of setup. That's another reason why I'm going to show it to you using idle, just so that this is as accessible as possible in case you've never used Python before. So go ahead and open up idle or whatever program you want to write your Python script in. I've got idle open here, so I'm going to go to File, New File, close out this other window, and we're going to go ahead and just save this right away because we won't be able to run it until we save it. So I'm going to drop this on my desktop, and I'll call this AGO backup example, and go ahead and save it as a .py file. Okay, so first thing we're going to do here is we're going to import some of the basic time tools that come with Python. So we're going to write from time, import strf time, all one word there. And since my last video, I learned that that stands for string from time. I couldn't remember what it was before. And we're going to use that to name our backup, and we can also use it to kind of do a quick print statement here at the beginning. So I like to do a print strf time, open parentheses, and then between a pair of single quotes here, or double quotes, we're going to do %C, and then close out both of those, both sets of open brackets there. And what that's going to do, I can actually run it. Click on run and run module. Yes, we'll save. You can see all it did was it printed today's date and time. So I'm working on this Tuesday, March 30th. That's just kind of nice to have. If your script takes a really long time to run, you can kind of see, you can kind of check in on it and see how long it's been running. But this part is optional. What we do want though, or what is required, our next line here, we're going to do from ArcGIS.gis import, and then we're going to do GIS in all caps. This can be kind of confusing that both of these are called GIS, but they are two different things. I'm not going to go into that or why it's like that, but just roll with it for now. And ArcGIS here, that's the ArcGIS on the ArcGIS API for Python, the set of ArcGIS Online tools. All right, so those are all the tools we're going to need for this. Next here, I'm going to create a little section with a pound sign or hashtag, whatever you want to call it, and it's going to be input variables. And I said I wasn't going to explain basic Python things, but what this is if you put a pound sign or a hashtag here, it just tells your script, hey, don't run whatever's on this line. So basically, it's just a comment for you or whoever you're sharing the script with to read or reference. So in this little section we made here, we're going to make 3 different variables. Our first one is going to be item ID equals, and then I'm going to do a single quote here. And what we want here is our item ID for our hosted feature layer in ArcGIS Online. So if we go back to the example hosted feature layer I had here of US Colored Springs, the easiest way to find the ID, in my opinion, is just to come up to the URL bar here, and you'll see after ID equals at the end, this long kind of code or ID. So you can just go ahead and copy it from there. Come back to our script here, paste it, and then make sure we close it with a single quote again here at the end. I'm going to go down another line, and we're going to make a variable called output equals, and this is going to be where on our computer we want to save the backup. So this can be anywhere at all on your computer. It can be on a local drive. You could do it on a network drive somewhere. But what we want to do, in my case, I have a folder here in my documents called backup data. And so I'm just going to copy that file path, and I'm going to do a single quote, paste that file path in, and then again be sure to close it with another quote here. So this is where I want my backups to go. Now with Python, these slashes here, and I can never remember if this is forward or backward slash, but they can be treated as escape characters by Python, and so this won't end up working. And what we can do to get around that is if we go to the beginning of our file path here, or our value, before this first single quote, we can just drop a lowercase r, and that tells Python, I want you to take the raw value of whatever's in this string, and so it doesn't treat these as escape characters anymore. And then our last input variable here, I'm going to call it temp file equals, And then we're going to use those time tools again. So we're going to type strf time. We're going to do open parenthesis, a single quote, and then I'm going to call this just backup. You can call this whatever you want, but this will be the name of your, when your script runs, it's going to download a zip file. This will be the name of the zip file. It'll also be the name of a temporary item that's going to appear in your content that should get cleaned up, but we'll talk about that later. But I'm going to call it backup. And then for a bit of quality control and to help align in our script later, work a little bit better, I'm going to add in some date information onto this name. And so I'm going to do underscore %m underscore %, lowercase d, underscore %, and I'm going to do an uppercase Y, and then close quote, close parentheses. And what this is doing is it's going to pull the current month, the current day, and the current year and add it to this name. So if we wanted, we can see what this will look like real quick. I can do print temp file. Then we can go to run module, yes, save. And then you should see here it popped up our name, so it's going to be backup, and then March 30th, 2021. And so this is really handy with this string from time tool. If you want to know what all of these commands are, the %sign commands, you can go to strftime.org. There's a bunch of these sites, but this is the one I always use because it's easy to remember. And this will show you all the different codes you can use. So in that first line there, we use the %C. If we scroll down here, you can see %C gives us the locale's appropriate time and date, and pops out something like this, so which is the full date and time information. But we were using %, lowercase m, which gives us the month as 2 digits. It's the same with lowercase d for the day, and then I used a capital Y for the year so that it gives me the full 4-digit year. Instead of, if we use a lowercase y, it would give us just 13, or if I ran it today, it would give us a 21 for 2021. So that's just, if you don't use that often, it's a good tool to use. So I'm going to delete this print statement here. And for the next part of our script, we're going to do the actual backup part. So I'm going to create another little section here. I'm going to call it create backup. And so the first step here is we want to tell the script, hey, go log into my ArcGIS Online account. And to do that, we're going to create a item or variable called GIS, all lowercase. We're going to do equals, and then GIS in all capitals, open parenthesis, open quote, or a single quote, and then what you want to do here is you want to put the URL path to your ArcGIS Online organization. So in my case, it's https aaronkolker.maps.arcgis.com, and then put a close quote and a comma. So if you don't know what your URL is, you can just go back to ArcGIS Online, log in, and go up to the URL bar here, and whatever's at the beginning, see https Aaron Kolker, all the way up to the arcgis.com part, that is your organization URL. So going back to our script here, once you've got your URL in, again, we want make sure you put a comma. We're going, because that means we're going to the next input parameter. And we need to put our username and our password. Now there are ways you can kind of write your script so that every time you run it, it'll require you to actually type in your username and password, and that way you're not saving your credentials in a file. In this case, however, we're going to be using Windows Task Scheduler to run our script automatically, and so I don't want to have to log in every time. There might be other ways of maybe making this more secure. And if you know them, please leave a comment below. Again, I'm not a guru, I'm still learning. It'd be nice to know that, but in my case, as long as you're saving this script somewhere secure on your computer, it's not accessible by anyone else, or, not on a public drive or anything like that, you should be okay. So we're going to do an open quote, and we'll put my username. Obviously, put whatever your actual ArcGIS Online username is there between the quotes, and then a comma, another single quote, and then whatever your password is, which is hopefully not password 123, but you'd put that here between set of quotes, and then we want to do a close parenthesis. So now we have this item or variable or token or whatever you want to call it. That is our login credentials. The next thing we want to do is we want to grab our item that we want to create a backup of. So we're gonna create an item here called data item, and that's going to be equal to GIS, lowercase this time. Okay, so we're now calling this item here lowercase GIS, or we're calling our account or our login information, and then we're going to write oops, move that away. We're going to do a dot content, so that means we're going to grab the content tools, and then from those tools we're going to grab the get tool. So we're going to do dot get, and we're going to do open parenthesis, and we're going to write item ID close parenthesis. So here we're saying, hey, log into my ArcGIS Online, go into my content and get this item, and that item is the first variable we set up, which we grabbed from the item detail page. Okay, next line we're going to write data item again, and this time we're going to do dot export. So we're saying export that item you just found. And if we want to compare this script to the manual process, this step would be, if I was on my hosted feature layer page right here and I go to click export data, that's the step we're replicating right now in our script. So we're doing export, we're going to do open parenthesis, and we're going to write temp file, which is one of our variables up there. The name of our backup basically is what we're telling it. Comma, and then we want to, in the next parameter here, we want to tell it what file format we want. So in my case, I want a file geodatabase, but if you wanted to, you could put CSV in here. I think you can put shapefile. Any of those things we saw on our example page here. And I'll try and find the link to the ESRI documentation that tells you all the possible ones there. But for the most part, it's the obvious one. If you want a file geodatabase, you write file geodatabase in proper case. And then we're going to do a comma, and you probably don't have to do this, but let's just say we want our other parameters are going to be none. We don't have anything else in particular we want to tell it. And then we do want to include weight. So write weight equals true. Make sure that's a capital T on there, and then close parentheses. What weight equals true does is, if your data is particularly large and it takes a long time to export, you don't want the script to move on ahead and try to do more things before that data is actually exported. So wait tells it, hey, make sure everything you did for this line, or make sure this process is actually finished before moving on to the next line. So now that what we've done in our script is we've told it to export the data, and we've created an extra item here. So in my example, I've created a file geodatabase in my content. What we need to do for our script is, in order to download it, we need to know the item ID for that item we just created. However, even though we just made it from this script, we don't actually know what that new item ID is. So I could go here and look, and find it and hard code that in, but we're going to be deleting and recreating this every time we run our backup, and that ID is going to change. So we can't hard code in the ID like we did up here. We have to figure out a way to go find it from that new item we made. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, we're going to make an item here called my export, and we're going to do gis.content again, and then do .search, and so that's calling the search tools in ArcGIS Align, and we're going to do open parentheses. The name of that file is going to be temp file again. So the name of the item in ArcGIS Align is going to be, in my case, backup with the date on it, because that's what we told it to export as. A comma, and then I'm going to add a parameter here called item type equals, and then do file geodatabase. If you don't include that, it's probably still going to work, but I'm putting it there just on the off chance that if I didn't name it this and I wasn't including the date information on it, maybe you name the backup the same thing as your item in ArcGIS Online. So in my case, it's US Sprinklers. If I exported it as another item called US Sprinklers, that was just a different file type, my search might find both, which would complicate things. I want it to just find the thing I exported, and so we can kind of help narrow that down a bit more by telling it specifically what kind of item that was. So I recommend doing that. If you downloaded or if you exported your data as something else, like if you did CSV up here, then you would want this item type to also be CSV. Okay, these two things should match. All right, so now our script, it's gone and it's found that item, or it's found something. We're going to tell it now to grab the item ID for that item it's found. So we're going to make yet another item here, and I'm going to call it, let's do FGDB for file geodatabase is equal to gis.content.get, and this is the same thing we did up here for item ID, but in this case we are going to actually pull the item ID off of our search result and grab it with the get function again. So we can use the previous line my export, because my export is now equal to whatever we found in our search. And then just in case it found more than one item, we're going to do a open bracket 0 close bracket. Actually, maybe that's required. I can't remember now. I think this is returned as a list, so we need to tell it we want it to grab the first item. So regardless, go ahead and do open bracket 0 close bracket. So that's telling it grab the first item in our search up here, which should be your backup item. And then we're going to do dot item ID, and the dot item ID it's part of the API, and it's saying grab the item ID off of whatever item we put in there. So now we have this item FGDB, which is equal to our thing we want to download in ArcGIS Online. And so now all we have to do is tell it to actually download that item. And if we go back to our manual comparison, this next line would be the equivalent of clicking this download button. So we're going to do FGDB. So we're calling that item we just made. We're going to do dot download, and then we're going to do open parentheses. And the only thing we really care about here is where we want to save that output. If you don't put anything in here, if you put open close parentheses like that, I think it'll just go to your default download folder. But in this case, I want to tell it to go to that backup folder I made. So we're going to do save underscore path equals output close parenthesis. Make sure you're paying attention to where we do and don't have single quotes. So in this case, for this variable, I made it up here. Again, that's where my backup data is. I don't need single quotes around that. And then the last thing we'll throw in here, say you run this script and it fails for some reason halfway through. You might have it where you have this file geodatabase item in your content. You go to run your script again, and then your script might yell at you, hey, I can't do this export you want me to do because there's already an item with that name. Now, if that might be more of a problem as well if you didn't use this time thing, like if you're naming all your backups the same thing. But we can just avert all of that, or avert, by doing fgdb dot delete and then open close parentheses. And so that's just saying, hey, that thing we exported, delete that. So in this case, it would be deleting this item. And that's really it. That's the entire script. We can, if we want at the end here, we can do a print, open parentheses, and then, write script complete at, and I'm going to do a pair of curly brackets, closing quote, and then dot format. We'll do open quote, strf time, open quote, or open parenthesis, open quote, and then we'll do what we did above, %C, and then close that all up. There should be 3 parentheses there. And what that's going to do is it's just going to print a thing at the end of the script that says, hey, this was completed at, and then grab the current time again, kind of like we did at the beginning. So I'm going to go ahead and test this. I'm going to replace this off screen really quick with my actual info, and then we'll run it and we'll check if it worked. Okay, so I've just made my window smaller to hide it so I don't have to go and post-edit this after with a blur effect. Let's go ahead and run module. And hopefully this runs pretty quick. My data is not very big, but if it works, well, we should see a script complete over here, and then I should have an item show up in my my output folder where I told it to go. Whoops, I forgot to take this part out. Oops. Let's try that again. However, it did work. So here's my backup, since it failed on the very last line of that script. But as you can see here, we have a backup we named with the day, the date, and the year, or the day and the month and the year. I'll cut it short, but if we went into our ArcGIS Online, we could see that the item we created is no longer there. All right, so now we have our script. It works when we run it manually. Now we want to actually schedule it to run at a certain time so that we can actually automate this. So to do that, we're going to use Windows Task Scheduler. I don't know what the equivalent is, or if there is an equivalent for Mac, so I'm sorry. You'll have to go out to Google from this point if you're on Mac. But with Windows Task Scheduler, we can tell it to run the script at whatever interval we want. And to do that, we need a file called a batch file. And the simplest way to do that is just to, in my opinion, just to open up Notepad. So if you just search Notepad. And the way this works is when we can tell the task scheduler to run a batch file. And when it looks at the batch file, it looks for a program to open, and then we can tell it a file to open with that program. So in our case, we're going to say, hey, go open Python, and then open this Python script I wrote and run it. And so this might vary depending on how you have Python installed or ArcGIS Pro installed. But what we first need to do is put in a path to our python.exe. So in my case, I have it installed here. It's part of the Arc Pro Conda package. I'll try and put a link or a general file path in the description of this video telling you where it would be if you just kind of installed ArcGIS Pro by default. And hopefully you'll be able to take it from there, but you're looking for the python.exe that comes with, preferably that comes with ArcGIS Pro, just based on the way we've set this up, so you have to do as little as possible. After that, just put in a single space, and then we just need to give it the file path to our script. So in my case, it's on the desktop here. I'm going to grab this path right here to my desktop, and then I'm just going to manually type this in real quick. So my script was called AGO backup example.py. So just make sure you have the actual file on the end of your path, but that's all we need for the batch file. So after you've got both those in there, put them on the same line. Although, fun fact, if you want, you can have if you want to run multiple scripts on a single task, you could actually keep going with this. Task scheduler will read each line kind of as a command. So if I had 3 scripts I wanted to run, I could do this, tell it what program I want it to run 3 times, and then put 3 different scripts on here. And it'll run them sequentially. But otherwise, we need to save this as a batch file. So we're going to go to File, Save As. I'm just going to drop this on my desktop again, and I'm going to call it, for simplicity, I'm going to name it the same thing as my Python script, but with a .bat on the end instead of .py. You'll see on my desktop here, I've got this batch file. I'm going to close that out. And then we need to open up Windows Task Scheduler. So if you go to your search and just put in Task Schedule, it should show up here. It's an app. And you'll come to a page like this, hopefully. If you don't, and you want to see all these, you can click on the Task Scheduler library option here on the left. And this will show you all of the kind of automated tasks your computer is running all the time. So these will all depend on what's installed on your computer and drivers. So like I've got my graphics card in here is doing a bunch of stuff, and OneDrive's doing stuff, and there should be a bunch of things in here. And we are going to add one more. So where it says Task Scheduler Library here, you can right click and go to Create Task, or you can go to Action at the top, Create Task. And we're going to set up our schedule here for our Python script. So I'm going to call this AGO, or here maybe let's do Python AGO backup script. You can call this whatever you want, doesn't matter. Put a description in here. I'll skip over it for sake of time. If you want, you could check run whether the user is logged on or not. And so that would be good if you want this to, if your computer is always on and you want this to run like in the middle of the night when you're not on your computer, you can check this option, and it's going to ask you to put in your Windows credentials. And that way, if your computer's on all the time, it will run this task no matter what. If you run it in the day when you're logged in, or you don't want it to run when you're not logged in, you can leave it on this default option. I usually like to do the run if they're logged in or not, and then put my password in there. But in this case, I'm going to leave it off. And then this is an important step where it says configure for. I'm on Windows 10. By default, it wants to put Windows Vista and Windows Server 2008. I'm not sure why, but go ahead and change this to whatever operating system you're on. So if you're on Windows 10, change this to Windows 10. It's an important step. You can do run with highest privileges as you want. I won't go into all these things because a lot of them are kind of self-explanatory, or they're not super critical. But once you've got that first tab filled out, go ahead and move on to the second tab, which is triggers. We're going to click New, and this is where we're going to set up our schedule. So there's options here for daily, weekly, monthly. In my case, let's say I want to do daily. I want it to happen once a day, and I want it to start, let's say I want it to run at 3 a.m. You can change this up here, okay? And then I would say, start tomorrow at 3 a.m. If you want, you can mess with these settings, delay it randomly, repeat every so often if you want it to run multiple times in one day. Stop task is good as if you're running this and it's taking a really long time, you can cap it off, etc., etc. So I'm going to click OK, and if you wanted, we saw the option for to do multiple times in one day. You could also come in here and just add a second, daily. Maybe I want it to run also at 12 p.m. Click OK, and then you can see in the same task we have it going off every day at 3 a.m. and every day at 12 p.m. I'm going to delete that other one for now. And you can edit these if you change your mind with the edit button here. Going to the next tab, Actions. This is where we're going to tell it what batch file we want it to run. So I'm going to click New, and we're going to leave it on Start a Program. I'm going to go to Browse, and on my desktop, I've got that batch file. I'm going to click Open, and I'm going to click OK. That's all I got to do for that. So it's going to go run that batch file. Like we said before, it's going to see that first line. It's going to say, all right, I'm going to open this program, and I'm going to run this file. On the Conditions tab here, again, some more options I'm not going to go into. They're kind of self-explanatory. And on the last tab here, Settings, a lot of these are kind of redundant. So for example, when we were setting up the trigger, we had those options, stop if it runs longer than so-and-so days. If you had multiple triggers in there, you could use this Settings tab here to kind of do an overarching setting. I'm going to leave those all as is, and then just click OK. And that's all there is to it. If you happen to be logged on to your computer when this time comes by, so in my case, if I was logged in at 3 a.m., you'll see a little black command prompt window pop up, and you'll see it running the script. If you put in print statements in here like I did, such as the start and the end, you'll see that show up in that window. If it fails, you'll see errors in there as well. Otherwise, if you run it and then go check your, you can check your, wherever you save that, your output, check if it's working there. If you run into an issue where it's failing, again, first thing I would check is on the task scheduler. Make sure you set the configuration to Windows 10 or whatever your operating system is. And so that's it. So hopefully you found this helpful, or someone finds this helpful. I know I always hear from a lot of people they wish they had backups for ArcGIS Online. And I think even if you don't have any Python experience, this is, I think anyone can do this. This is just, a dozen or so lines of code, and you just kind of have to know where to grab file paths from. So I hope that helps someone. And if you have any questions, I can try and answer them, although it can be difficult to troubleshoot Python over YouTube comments. Again, I'm not a guru, so I might not know what your specific error is, but again, I hope that helps. Thanks for your time, and have a good one.